everyone. We're going to go into a session around learning and access. And our presenter is from, well, remotely. It's Tanya Merrick. Well, I hope you can see her. My name is Lane Robinson. I'm moderating, and we have Katie, who is on the tech, and Tamara. So in this session, we'll hear a little bit about learning and access and some of the challenges that we have. And I'm going to ask Tanya to just say a little word about yourself first and foremost, and then share some of your thoughts with us about learning and access in youth work.
Okay, good. All right. So is everybody hearing me clearly?
Yes, you could go a bit louder.
Okay. All right. Well, I have a very big voice, so I will speak big. So I am Tanya Merrick, aka Tanya Global. I am a professional youth worker, and I've been involved in youth development for almost 20 years, or if not 20 years now, because I've been saying that for a while. And I have worked at all levels of the social development landscape. I've been a grassroots youth worker. I have done program policy development, research, you name it, advising. And no, I do consulting, but I am still a volunteer youth worker. I still work with young people. And so today's session is like a merger of two sessions, really talking about youth work and how we have been able to bridge the gap in Jamaica in terms of having an undergraduate program, but the reality of that situation and the steps that we've taken to be able to train almost 1,000 youth workers since our inception in 2006. And so first, we define youth work, and Jamaica has defined youth work for itself, youth development, and it's called youth development work. In the Caribbean, we have been intentional in calling youth work youth development work, because youth work is not just youth engagement. It's actually a tool for development, tool for community development, national development, and regional development. So we see youth development as a science, a practice, an approach, and a process that is positioned as a developmental tool. So that's very important for us in the Caribbean. There is no Caribbean definition, because when regions were defining, our Caribbean region didn't come together to make a definition, but we do have a degree program that is shared. We have competency standards up to the master's level as a region, and we have vocational certification in Jamaica, and it is available for the region. So that's the regional aspect. When we talk about youth work in Jamaica and the Caribbean, we are also talking about a colonial history coming down from industrialization and Great Britain, but we're also talking about a pan-African youth development work, where there was a whole African context in how engagement and development of young people took place. And so that is very important for us. Right? So I'm moving on to the objectives. What I want to do today is show you how small groups can make a difference in youth development work. I want to show you the relationships and how, as an organization, we've been able to sustain relationships to be able to deal with services and train youth workers. I wanted to expose you to the reality about access to education in Jamaica for youth workers, share some strategies for delivering training, as well as for sustainability. And as you go through the presentation, I'm at slide 5, you will see this is a slide with young people, but all of our other pictures that you'll see in our slides are from trainings or award ceremonies with our youth workers in Jamaica. And so I want to just set up a picture quickly of what the context of Jamaica looks like, because context is very important. My context is not the same in Africa for somebody in Africa. It's not the same for somebody in even another Caribbean country. So we have a local context. So in Jamaica, the youth development workforce is very large. It's a large sector, but most of it is informal. So the employed youth workers are the lesser portion of the persons that are working with young people. And in youth work, we like to talk about persons working with young people and youth workers, because not everybody working with a young person is a youth worker, and that needs to be clear so that we can build the capacity of everybody accordingly, right? So we have specific and non-specific. there is low knowledge of youth development as a science, practice, approach, and process. Despite there is a lot of material that has been produced, there has been a lot of articulation over the years, still the general recognition and understanding of youth development is very low. We use it. It's like if I was to ask a question right now, and Lane, you have to be my eyes.
Yes, that's right.
I was to ask a question right now and say, okay, can somebody define the word hope for me? Just pick somebody, Lane, and let them define the word hope. What hope means to them.
I'll start off with Kim.
Towards a positive future that keeps me inspired to work towards that.
So Kim says looking forward to a future, positive future.
All right.
And we have Scotland.
Being happy and content.
Being happy and content. Anybody
right.
else?
One more.
Any other gentleman or lady? What does hope mean to you?
Thriving and surviving.
Thriving and surviving. Very concise and neat.
Right. So you see, we have three different persons and we have the same word and we have three different meanings, because sometimes people feed the meaning of things and give meaning to things based on their own lived experiences. And it's the same thing with youth development. So as a practitioner and as a practice, we have to understand that, but we also have to give definitions to things. So there is an educational element that I'm always having to do, because to get a practice recognized, you have to be able to articulate the practice. Every practice has a language. Accounting has its language, law has its language, medicine have their language. Every practice has a language, and youth development has a language. And so, you know, our father of youth development in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, and I would say in the world, because there is none like him. I don't know if there ever be, but I know that he has placed a lot of us on his shoulders, Sir Henry Charles, and I call him Sir Charles, and he has always encouraged me, and that's what he's always encouraged me to do. He's always encouraged me to name the concepts. He's always encouraged me to articulate the science of youth development, but what does youth development mean in a process to educate the sector? So youth development, the knowledge of it is still very low, and we have to always be educating. Sometimes there's little to no recognition. We have been consistent every year recognizing our youth workers, recognizing our youth work organizations, trying to get as much publicity as we can to be able to help with the recognition process, right? So this is some of the context. We have a lot of non-resource groups, community-based groups, non-profits. They're doing youth work. They don't have the resources, but they are the majority of those engaging with young people. Also, we've had a decline in the Caribbean in terms of regional integration that we used to get through CYP when they had a regional office. The Caribbean and youth development as a movement was much stronger. But thankfully, the pioneers like Sir Charles have not given up. And so youth development is such a powerful integration tool. We are still charting that course, but there are effects of not having that movement like we used to. Okay, so in Jamaica, I said we have the undergraduate program. We were a part of the development and review of that program. That program is a powerful program. What it does, it produces development practitioners. After that degree program, 4 years, you're able to integrate into the development sector. The challenge is most of the people working in youth development already have qualifications in another practice. So to get them to do a 4-year degree, it's next to impossible. The second challenge, a lot of the people working in youth development might not be at the level to enter a university program. There are no alternative pathways. The third is they're not remunerated well to even be able to access. So you have low uptake and then you have low completion rate. So that's some of the challenges that we're seeing with the degree program, as amazing a program as it is, because that program is coming out of youth work from the 1980s. The Caribbean has been doing trainings in youth work, and it has a large body of knowledge and skill sets that go with it. And the degree program also aligns with our competency standards. Everything we do, if we even do a one-day training, it aligns with our competency standards, right? So that is the context. A degree program, majority of people not taking up that program for other reasons. And so we have this broad gap. What have we done to meet this gap? We, in youth development, you look at it as the glass is half empty or the glass is half full. For us, it's half full. So what has been our response to this context as an organization? One, as I told you, we articulate youth development. We're very specific, and I've had arguments with heads of government in Jamaica about the terms like resocialization, rehabilitation. And I've tried to explain to them that this is not possible because young people are in a continuum of development. So it's not redoing them, it's actually facilitating and accommodating their continued development. And so you have to know the language to speak the language, you have to know the practice. And I'll give you a simple strategy at near the end of the presentation so that you, whichever country you're in, whatever context you're in, you can use this strategy and start to meet the needs of your youth workers. So the next thing we've done is we've designed short courses based on the needs of groups and organizations. So we have trained the police, we have trained formal teachers, we have trained informal teachers, we have trained soldiers, we have trained business people, we have trained community-based leaders, we have trained young people, youth leaders, a wide gamut of individuals. We have designed, we have core areas of youth development practice that we break down for any sector, right? Then we have also provided support to youth serving organizations. So a lot of nonprofit groups, a lot of community-based groups, they are not resourced just as we are. But what we have and we know that's powerful is our knowledge. And that's what we leverage. We leverage knowledge. So we form partnerships with these organizations and groups, and we help them to build sustainable programs. We help them to build effective programs, and we help to build their capacity to be able to implement programs and to engage young people in a sustainable way. Then I would do this at no cost. You know, a lot of the times people ask us, how do we do it? We do it through partnership, we do it through passion, and we do it through knowledge, using what we have. Also, what we do is we engage community-based organizations. So we are there, we help not just youth-specific, but all community-based organizations to mainstream, to do youth mainstreaming in their community level policy and program level work. Because Jamaica is coming from that kind of Pan-African history of community, where community and young people are important components of that community in terms of community activism and community action, community volunteerism. So we continue to foster that and to support that movement. And we will partner with communities. We will apply for grants for well-needed communities, and we will help them implement those programs in their community. So we operate like a funnel to get resources to the ground. We participate in the international dialogue that we're doing now. We are a founding member of OKEWA, the Alliance of Youth Work Associations, because we see that it is powerful to be able to learn. When I was able to learn about Malaysia, learn about Singapore, learn about India, and be able to read case studies and to be able to interact with individuals from those countries and hear their context, there is a lot of learning that took place for me as an individual youth worker. And then this has translated into the work that I do. We also have embarked on a journey to become a social enterprise. So the structure of our entity is also a social enterprise where we are using a business model, right? And that again is in partnership with the university, where we are trying to not be able to, we don't want to ever not be able to do what we do. And so what have we achieved? We have trained, in the first 10 years, we trained 500. Now we're up to almost 1,000 youth workers or young people, different groups that we have trained. We have sustained our events to recognize youth workers annually and to promote youth work. We have a lot of partnerships with international donors. And sometimes you'd be surprised, international donors don't have the resources to do youth development, doesn't fall under their agenda. We've provided free training to Peace Corps. We've provided training to CUSO International, that's the Canadian version of Peace Corps, to have the volunteers be sensitized to youth development. So when they come into the landscape, they are better able to engage with young people. We've developed certain niche packages and services that we offer to commercial entities like banks that is pertinent to youth development. We've conducted a lot of research, and we have actively been a part of the international community. So those are some of our successes, and we continue. We have a lot of training, every different type of training you can think about. We've advocated to the government of Jamaica for a Youth Development Work Act to be able to legislate certain things like social and criminal background checks, to be able to keep the integrity of the profession while protecting the young people. And we have now expanded the dialogue into the Americas, into the North American context, because, you know, we always see that North America is not a part of a broader global discussion outside of the UN. So we have been penetrating, showing them how the principles and practices of youth development works. That is my theme, youth development works. And so what have been the challenges? We have to be constantly resensitizing political directorates, because in absence of an act, the youth ministry gets bounced. And every time it gets bounced, we have to resensitize that minister. And sometimes that lack of political will affects coordination of youth development in general, and more specifically, the budding movement of youth development work. So that's a key challenge for us. Also, another challenge is there's a covert competition in youth development. I think it's coming from outside culture, where nonprofit entities and groups are seen as something that you can make money from. I don't know who gave them that idea, because I've given more to youth development work in terms of money than I've ever gotten out of it. Every consultancy I do, a portion is always given to the Jamaica Professional Youth Workers Association to forward the work. And most of the work we've done is from the contributions of the directors. So I don't understand, but it does exist. And then it causes a territorialism. And so sometimes the beauty of the partnerships that we could achieve, because one of our values in youth work is synergy. You cannot do it if we do it on our own. The work of the collective is greater than the work of the individual. And so sometimes that's a challenge for us. We will do work and people will take the glory. That's no problem for us, because we believe in our practice. We have limited resources. And so sometimes we want to do more, but in all good conscience, we have to, just keep taking small steps. And you'd be surprised, as a small group taking small steps consistently, you can achieve just as much in the long term as the large organization taking large steps inconsistently. There's also an unwillingness of paid youth workers to be able to come into, not necessarily, okay, we understand you're a psychologist, you don't want to be a youth worker, but you're doing youth work. But there's also an unwillingness sometimes to be involved in the advocacy and the movement of the profession on a broader scale. And that's a challenge. Sometimes there are competing regional and international agendas. We have a local context, we have local agendas that are important, but then we have regional and international agendas, some youth specific, some not, that want to come and prevail and sometimes overpower our reality. And that's a challenge. And that's when we have to stand up strong in our advocacy, understand our context, because you cannot engage the sector unless you understand your context. And then we have overworked core groups. So there are people like us and others like Sir Charles. There are other youth workers through a study we did that have been involved in youth work for 50 years. And these people have just been consistently, passionately working from they were youth, like I am, and sometimes they become burnt out. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was told that I was not going to live past 24 months, and I had to step away a lot from youth work. and it hurt, but I had to do that. And now that I have come back and learned, thankfully, learned to balance. But there are a lot of people out there that we're losing because the core group of passionate people. So what we're doing now is we're trying to partner with the university. We're going to the grassroots level, and we're bringing in young people who other people would have ignored, and we are training them to take over because we want them to take over. Each generation must own their situation. And then sometimes the lack of legislation for youth development, as I said, affects us because things keep bibbing and bobbing all around. So what are my recommendations? Whatever context you're in, there are certain things that must happen for your youth development work capacity on the ground to be successful. You have to get exposed to youth development as a science, a practice, approach, and a process from knowledgeable and experienced people. You have the Commonwealth Youth Program. You have Kaiwa. Kaiwa is perfect. There are a lot of us, we are technical experts, and some of us are not just academic experts, but we're also, like me, grassroots experts. And so you have to be knowledgeable. You have to be able to be knowledgeable of the practice. So assess your context and see, do we have the knowledge? If we don't have the knowledge, where can we get it from? So in the future, we will be working with our Caribbean partners to make sure that the basic principles and practices, every group, every ministry should have that. The basic principles should be in-house. Then you have to prove it. So you know it, but have you done it? And that's the war that sometimes we have, people don't want to talk about with academics and youth workers. I am an academic, I have lectured and I do research all the time and all of that, but I am first and foremost, my passport says youth development worker. I'm proud of that, right? Because academics sometimes don't do, they haven't proven what it is they have coined and conceived. We conceive and we prove, and so you have to prove it. Right now, I do some work with young men in prison and very aggressive environments, serious environments. And my teen said to me, she said, "Mommy, don't you get scared going in?" And I said, "No." And she says, "Why? You could be hurt. People have been hurt." I said, "Because I have proven my practice. I believe in youth development work. And so you have to be able to prove it, because I'll have officers ask, like, I've gone to maximum security facilities and they're on lockdown because of violence. And the head of the facility has said to me, no, let her in. And they would lock me down in the maximum security space with the young people. And I will have a beautiful session. And then they will come in and the energy and the atmosphere is transformed, because I know the different methodologies when they're necessary, how to apply them. And I have never been attacked. And trust me, I go hard sometimes. I kick off my shoes. I speak your language very raw, and we engage. But there's a method to the madness. So you have to prove it. Then you have to organize. You have to organize your small group of passionate individuals. We have people in our organization, they're not youth workers. They never started out as youth workers. There might be a pastor or a financial controller that deals with the money and things, but they've been trained and they utilize that training, even their own life settings, and they can tell you this thing, whoa, this thing work. You know, people think it's magic. It's not magic. I've been accused of doing spiritual things, but all I've used is youth development practice. Then you have to be able to assess your context. You have to know your context. You cannot have an outsider coming in and telling you what your context is. Just like I've told you what my local context is and what my regional, you have to know the history of youth development in your region. What is it to you? Youth development is a movement for us. It's a socio-political and economic movement in the Caribbean. And I speak that unapologetically. I have been known to be confrontational because of my passion. That's okay, because as a small island girl, I know my reality. All right. And then you have to be able to become an expert. After you've assessed, you have this knowledge, become an expert. So when you're advocating, you have your data, you have to become an expert about your reality. And we have to educate. I have given you many things here. We can talk about youth development as a system. We can talk about youth development response in national agendas. We can talk about the principles and the practices. You have to be able to educate in every opportunity you are given, but you cannot educate unless you know. So you have to go back up to exposure. Then you have to include young people. You have to include youth leadership. When we were formally presenting the code of ethics to the government in 2008, we had 70% young people. We had young people that were working with us. We have associate members who are youth leaders and young people who they were the volunteers. They were doing the work. They have to be included. We had one who had died by a mishap in the hospital, and there was a big protest about it because she was such a powerful volunteer. Her funeral was like that of a diplomat because she was so involved in youth development. We have to start small, start somewhere, and be consistent with what you start. Small steps consistently achieve great outcomes. And so you have to be start somewhere in terms of knowledge, in terms of capacity building, in terms of engagement. You have to start somewhere, and then you have to advocate. You have to be able to speak up for the profession. You have to be able to speak up for youth development as a response agenda. You have to be able to speak up for the young people, your partners, your youth partners. You have to be able to speak up for them where they don't have access, and where they can access, you have to be able to open the door. And so this is what we've done. This is what we continue to do. This is what we hope to do more. And so there you have it. So over to you, Lane.
So thank you so much, Tanya. Now, Tanya has been very passionate about what she has said, and it's almost a case study in her own journey and Jamaica's journey as they established the Jamaica Youth Workers Association. It would be good to hear some of your questions or reflections on some of what she has said. Is it as difficult in your own country context to grow youth work, to network youth work, to get the government to listen? Is it the same where the youth workers are leaving the profession because they just don't feel recognized and supported and empowered? Where are they going? Where are these workers going? And why are they leaving? How can we retain them? What is the challenges in terms of getting them to access the training that is available? Is it that they think that they know it, they probably have grown up with the passion and they've been doing it all their lives, they have the competencies, but now having another qualification is not for them? Is there something that you can compare and contrast with some of what you heard? So Tanya, thank you for sharing that. I'm very passionate, and I can personally say, I know when you were just coming through.
Yes.
Because I know I can tell when she was in the diploma program.
Yes.
Yes, and as a youth empowerment officer at our Youth Information Center back in those long ago, isn't it?
Long ago, it was so long ago.
Long ago. So it's good to hear the passion, the drive, and the thought processes behind the work that is going on in the Caribbean, in Jamaica in particular. Perhaps you have a question or a thought or a reflection. How is it in your part of the world? I'll start off with in the Pacific. How is it in the Pacific? Kim.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing a great experience on the ground. I think for us in the Pacific, there are different contexts, and those contexts ties to culture, even the level of expression. And I think accessibility it's one of the hindrances, access to the government structures, some of the challenges that in terms of governance that we have. But there are, of course, youth-led organizations that work at the national level, even with PNG, because I come from Papua New Guinea, and even in the Pacific. I think much of it, the similar experiences, starting out from the ground. The challenge that we see is that developing partners, even governments, come on board when you are at the top, or when you try to make your way after 5 years, after say, they don't see the potential when you're trying to start off as a child. They don't see that. They only come on board when you have something tangible, maybe to flagship their brand. That's something that you should look at. I think that's a huge challenge as well. So start something, especially for young, especially volunteer.
Question for both of you. To what extent do you think the regional organizations, which are quite strong in Jamaica, for example, CARICOM, and the Pacific states here, to what extent that regional dimension is helpful?
Thank you. And I think regional, of course, learning from the Caribbeans with the sport. I think climate change now is trending, of course, because climate change, and I see that trend with the CARICOM or in fifth, they establish, even the UN, they establish young people, and I think that's some entry point that we can have, especially on the ground, supporting young people to deliver effective projects. And I think not only with CYC, but other, because I am engaged in other national youth-led organizations, the private sector did invest in youth-led organizations to support work in community development across the country. Even in Pacific as well, like, for example, DFET or Australian government, New Zealand, they support work, youth living work in terms of climate change across the Pacific. So I think that's an entry point, especially in terms of bringing together the private sector. I think that's a huge challenge, because post private sector is more profit oriented. So how do they see young people that, okay, we give you the funds, social responsibility?
Investment.
Yes.
They want to see some return.
That's something that we try to ask governments and even development partners to support. Because private sector have their own narrative.
So one question is, how do you engage the private sector? How do you get the private sector involved? And the second one is, has CARICOM had a role as a regional intergovernmental organization that has some mandate with respect to young people?
Okay, let me start out with the first one. The first one is more positive answer. So how I engage the private sector is, we engage private sector on a local level. So we first include private sector in our work with youth organizations in communities. We engage them as a stakeholder. And so sometimes when we're doing small trainings on the grassroots level, we engage the small businesses in that community. Whatever resources we are spending, let's say we are doing refreshments, we make sure that it goes to a small business in that community. And that becomes a tool for that group now to have a partnership with that small organization. And we do it on the larger scale as well. So as a consultant and an expert in youth development, I am called into private sector organizations. They like my flavor, just like how they like jerk chicken all over the world. They like my flavor, but my flavor is youth development. And so I build relationships with them, building capacity of their workers, using youth development practices, and then now making partnerships with them for the movement of youth development. Sometimes there are private sector organizations that also want to do youth engagement, and we offer our services free to them, because we know at first nobody is willing to pay for what they don't understand. And then when they understand, when they have success doing their corporate citizenship engagements, then we are leveraging. So what we leverage is our knowledge. And we've had challenges, like you, as I said, with the government, but we continue to do, sometimes doing free. We volunteer our services free to the government. We sensitize their youth workers. We just did a free refresher training for all of the officers at the Ministry of Youth, virtual training for 2 days, to be able to keep those. That's what we're leveraging, our knowledge. And then with CARICOM, our regional group, they have a youth program, and we have partnered with them in developing a program that they want to develop. We are trying to partner with them to do more. We find challenges. Again, I mentioned the regional agendas, and sometimes the powers that be have not bought on to the viability of youth development. And sometimes that's the power of the collective, because when we get to say this in an international conference, or when we get to say this in front of our Commonwealth youth ministers, then sometimes you will have a few passionate ones who will then pull in from that discussion. But we do have challenges, because there is some competitiveness. When you hear that, we work well with CYP, there is some competitiveness, but we don't pay any of that any attention. And we see all of it as the cup is half full. We are working for the young people of Jamaica and the young people of the region. And so we use everything as an opportunity to be able to do something about our issues.
Thanks for that one. Let's hear from another. Oh, go back, retort.
Sorry, just Thank you, Tanya, for sharing that. I think one of the entry points, like you as a youth worker, I want to hear your experience. You as a youth worker, building your experiences, building your personality, and like your expertise, and the transition into an organization more structured. And the reason is that recently I asked one of my colleagues, and she said, "Oh, she built," and even for myself as an individual, and I think this ties back into the one of the I that Len was sharing, the integrity that you build over time. Because the private sector, even partners come through first to screen you as an individual, and then you try to brand that, or you try to channel that, if it's kind of support within your space, to the other youth networks. How does that, how do you play that, especially if other partners, you mentioned about agenda. If they come and if it's not within your space, do you channel to other organizations, or you try to tackle it within your reach, within your space and the network?
How do you manage that?
Right now, so I've engaged CARICOM, and I'm waiting for the union. But while I'm waiting for the union, I'm engaging individual organizations. So I'm engaging Trinidad, I'm engaging Bahamas, I'm engaging Cayman Islands. Yes, for our regional movement, but also to get the word out, and for them to pull on the resources we have, because what we have can share. We have knowledge, and that's something Sir Charles taught us. We have knowledge, and that is the most powerful resource that we have. Even more powerful than money. I've used knowledge to do programs that were to engage 5,000. We've engaged 50,000 with the same little money, but with knowledge and support. So while I'm working one group, I'm working another, and every single opportunity that we can get, we are putting our hand out to make partnerships. We're not waiting on one, because, and while we're doing this, we work like this: top down, bottom up. So we're working on the bottom, we're working at the top to meet in the middle. And we don't wait on the top, because there's almost too much to do, always too much to do on the bottom. While we're working, building individuals, building groups, we're engaging at the top to meet at a centric point.
It's good. Well, thanks for that one.
There's a
we
question
have
online, Lane. There's a question
Sure.
online. Somebody asked me about the process to be professionalized, and how long does it take to take for the process. So I'm assuming, and what is the relationship between youth workers and social agents? So youth workers are social agents, and youth work is synergy. Synergy is our value. So we cannot work in isolation. As I say to our community when I go in, you cannot have me as an outsider come in to do community development for you. I'm not coming in here to do community development for you. I'm coming in here to, with my resources, to support you doing your work and doing your work better. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it with you. And so everybody is a social agent, but the process of time it takes to professionalize. Professionalization is a lifelong thing. I have to keep current. That's why I keep volunteering and working with young people at no matter what other level I'm working at. And in Jamaica, it is different because the association offers individualized support to people and organizations. So some people might never want to be a professional youth worker, but their capacity can be built to perform at the level that they're at, and they can always be given support and supervision accordingly. So everything is customized and tailorized to fit individuals and groups.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Tanya. Want to get some other perspectives in the room. Any other region, country, share your experiences. Scotland, how is it there? Are you having some of the same challenges there? Is it different?
I think that the process is similar in terms of maybe people who are interested in becoming youth work come in at different angles. When we try and have a pathway where young people as young leaders then become as volunteers, and they might be interested in then pursuing a course, a full-time course to become qualified. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but we've got an ageing workforce. Yeah. And with COVID, as a lot of our staff disappeared, they decided to, take retirement, walk away. And we've had youth workers in my area for about, you know, as old as me. They've been in youth work for about 20 years, and they were amazing. You know, they're the mothers, the grandmothers, the aunties, they feed people out of their own pocket. And I don't think that is recognised sometimes by community leaders or decision makers, because it's that nurturing approach that I think is part of youth work. And there is that argument where you might not professionalise that, but I think I would agree with Tanya that it's about helping them understand the competencies, like what they are doing is at a level that, you know, you can learn more skills that you can put in your toolkit and so on. So we're at the stage where we're trying to get apprentices maybe, or we're trying to bring on volunteers. We've maybe brought in lower paid entry level jobs, so it's not such a big jump for somebody to then get paid. We've got a living wage for sessional staff. I think that's about it, but I think we need, I hear what you say about doing something for nothing, and I think we've kind of come round a full circle where we used to have a lot of investment in youth work many moons ago when I first started, and it's trickled down to, you know, we've got a wee tap that's running very slow at the moment, and I think I would agree with you. I'm really energised by what you've said, and I'm actually going away with a wee bit more courage to start fighting a wee bit more and using that knowledge and using the skills that I've kind of tucked away in a wee drawer. And I'm a wee bit quieter these days, but maybe we need to kind of rage out a wee bit more and speak it out and say we need to be valued. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your honesty on that as well. That's really, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, you know, it's in Scotland, because Scotland is such a model, was such a model in terms of the progressive nature of the youth work practice there, that now to see that you are, the challenges that you're facing now are real. But Tanya, do you have a response to that?
Yes, we did that. You know, when I was back in the day, when I was in the ministry, what we did was we had youth leaders who were volunteering and building their personal capacities as people, and we identified those among them who were very passionate, and we made a plea to the permanent secretary to have them come in as apprentice youth workers, paid, you know, lower because of the qualifications that they would come with, but that they would build their capacity, be able to earn a decent wage that would be able to, you know, we don't have the free tertiary education in Jamaica, that they would be able to access education. And we've had some amazing success stories. Like we've had youth leaders now moving on to, I won't speak because sometimes that's my leverage, but we've had our youth leaders move on to other sectors that do really good work. And we've had youth workers who've been trained, who are from other practices, that have now started social enterprises, and they are using youth work in that practice, like education. We have a NGO. Well, no, she's a business person, and she offers services to the Ministry of Education based on youth development work principles and practices. And we have a lot of young youth leaders coming up with nonprofits and social enterprises that are doing some innovative things, and they've come up through the ranks, but they have to have a pipeline of passion. So those of us who carry the mantle, we have to stay passionate. Trust me, I know it's hard, but we have to stay passionate about what we do, because it's that fire that's going to light their fire. And when their fire gets lit, it might not look the same like ours, but let's just leave them, trust the principle, and let them carry on.
We have another 5 minutes or so left, but I think what was said in the yesterday was that this is a vocation. It's not just a profession, it's a calling. And that calling, sometimes, you know, if it's on you that this is what you see yourself and you can't, then that's how it goes. And sometimes you do get a bit, the challenges are so much that you do get a bit discouraged. But this is why we meet together and we exchange and we support each other in this space. And that's what the association is supposed to do. A place where people can come and find that, for youth workers themselves, to find that safe space and can get that support. Let's hear a little bit about what's happening in Nigeria. So we've heard from the Pacific, we've heard from Scotland or Europe, so to speak. But in Africa, what can we, what is your thoughts? Share your name again so everybody knows as well.
My name is Alande Conch. So I was just going to chip in about the pathway for resourcing youth workers and then the potential of the youth leaders in that process. Earlier this morning, I actually shared on the research that we did from my work titled Youth Leaders and Youth Workers. So basically, they're just trying to look at a lot of young leaders who will spend some time, about 2, 3, 4, 5 years working as youth leaders. And in that process, getting competencies and skills and exposure that allows them to become youth workers without the label of youth workers. And we have this project that we do that. We use some of about 60 youth leaders, and then they were able to help us with our research, their consultation, and then we have all these skill set that they possess already without any formal training, other than the fact that they have been youth leaders for a couple of years before that. And I think we can use that as we begin to think about the shortage of youth workers or the absence of it, to say that, oh, we can begin to encourage young youth leaders because they are already in this space. They're already doing, and that's exactly what you just reinforced of what they did in Jamaica.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that from Nigeria. One more thought, and then I'll ask Tanya to something
I sort of said in one of the sessions earlier as well. We talked about governments, but we usually talk about them in terms of money, what money can they offer. But there's more than money that they can offer. They can actually add promotion to us. And I think we're not valued. Youth work is not valued. And that is why I think it is huge. I mean, I'm in the voluntary sector, and I think that's why there's a huge problem trying to recruit people, because there isn't the positive message out there. And people have lost a bit of altruism. I think, people are a little bit more, and, I don't necessarily believe that. I think people do sort of look at their own lives a bit more than maybe what they would have 10, 15 years ago. But I think it's important that we encourage governments to shine a spotlight on the good work that's being done, and not just us saying we need more money.
Absolutely.
Because actually, I'm in Northern Ireland, we are funded reasonably well, but what we could benefit from is that, this is what's actually going on now.
Yeah, it's good. Excellent. No, thank you for that. So we've heard almost from a little snapshot across the world about there are challenges that are similar, and there are some things that we can do that we can learn from each other. But Tanya, you've shared a lot, and I want to also thank you for sharing of yourself. So you've told us some of your personal story, your personal journey, and thank you. But any final words from you, having talked a bit about access, looking at this conference broadly, where do we go from here? Where do you think we should be going? You made a lot of recommendations there, but if there's one or two things that you think we should really try and do, what is that if we're going to make learning and, open those pathways for other youth workers and growing the profession over time? Any thoughts?
Well, one of the first things we have to do two things. We have to protect those that are there. So like my sister in Scotland, we have to understand youth workers suffer a lot of vicarious trauma. Youth workers suffer a lot of systemic oppression. Young people are putting a demand on youth work now to be authentic, because young people are globalized and they're exposed to global issues of racism, social injustice, inequalities. They're questions they're asking now. So a young man in prison, he wants to know why he's a prisoner, his brother is a prisoner, his grandfather is a prisoner, his daddy is a prisoner, his mother is a drug addict. He wants to understand why this is his story, and why it's so common in his community. He's asking about social justice. So we have to remain authentic. We have to grow, and we have to protect ourselves. We have to practice mental health. When you see me on the camera, the boys joke about it. They say, Miss Tanya, if they look at the camera from the head office and watch you jigging and doing the things that you're doing, they must be having a laugh. Yes, because we're doing meditation, we're doing all kinds of things to help them to cope, to learn, to grow while they're incarcerated. And so we have to do those things. Everything I do and use, I test, and I have 3 generations of millennials in my house. So everything I do with them, I do here. And so we have to take care, protect the passionate that are there, and we have to draw the passionate in. And we can only do that by being authentic as personal people and authentic as professionals. So there's authentic youth work, and we have to be authentic. We have to be able to answer the hard questions about racism and inequality. We have to be willing to question ourselves, because that's what pulls young people. And we have to pull in the young people from the grassroots, pull in some young people who never, I have a young man who he's going off to a long sentence, and he says he would want to engage young people. He would want to be that for others. Now that he's come to understand the social injustice and inequity that caused him, influenced him to be where he is, he would want to become a change agent. And so we have to protect who is there, wellness, holistic wellness of our youth workers, passion-driven activities, recognize them, celebrate them, educate them, refresh their knowledge base. And we have to bring in new young people, younger people. They are there. They just believe in authenticity. They just have some deeper questions. Youth work is about social change. It's about questioning the social order. And we have to be willing to do that. And sometimes organizational mandates affect that ability, but we have to be very smart in how we work with our young people and just remain passionate people. So big up on yourself. And thank you so much.
Very good. So thank you, Tanya, for the session. And sorry you couldn't be with us in person. You know, all this paperwork business sometimes is very difficult.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you were still here to share your thoughts. We heard you, we felt you. Your presence was still very much here. We look forward to hearing more from you in the coming hour. But let me thank you for participating so well, for engaging and for asking questions and being a part of the session. Those online as well, if you can hear us for your question and your presence, we thank you. We now go to the last session, the closing plenary in the main room. We're going to kind of get a kind of a pan-Commonwealth perspective on some of these issues as we close out the day with what we have learned and what we have picked up so far. So we go back into the main plenary. Let me thank Kate, Tamara, for helping with the note-taking. And thank you again for being in this session. Thank you, Tanya. See you over the other side in the meeting.
Yes, I'll see you over the
Thank
other
you.
side.